real quick. The House Criminal Justice Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Hope.
Here.
Representatives Andrews. Here. Carter. Green. Young. Here. Arbit. Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu. Here. Filler.
Yes.
Mueller.
Arbit just walked in.
Bazat.
Present.
Harris.
Here.
Bagol.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 11 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. Representative Young moves to adopt the minutes from the October 3rd meeting. Without objection, the minutes are adopted. And before we start today, I would like to announce and remind everyone that if you're planning to speak during testimony, you must turn a card into the clerk beforehand. We're going to go ahead and get started. We'll hear testimony on House Bills 4917 and 4918. Representative Steckloff and your guests.
Thank you, Chair Hope and members of the committee. Thank you for having me today. We are here to talk about what's been going on in our transportation for the past few years. As we've seen since COVID, the rise of assault on our bus drivers, our conductors has only risen. So today I'm before you with new legislation to talk about sentencing guidelines and how we move from here to help protect these members. And I have a big team with me today that'll be able to help answer a lot of your questions.
Great. Would you like to call them up?
Yep.
Okay. And just to make a note, we do have cards here from Donald Roach of Smart Transportation Division, BJ Trumbull from BLET/IBT, and Nate Herron from Smart TD. Go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Hope, Vice Chair Andrews, and Minority Vice Chair Filler, and members of the Criminal Justice Committee. Thank you for Representative Steckloff for bringing this bill forward. My name is Donald Roach. I'm the Michigan State Legislative Director for the International Association of Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers. I represent the Transportation Division of Smart TD. We represent roughly 6,500 bus drivers and 3,100 Amtrak members across the United States. We're here to speak in support of House Bills 4917 and 4918. Just as a little background, these bills mirror similar legislation that was just recently passed in New Jersey and Illinois in an effort to help protect their transit workers. As Representative Steckloff said, we saw an alarming uptick of assaults to our Amtrak members in late 21 to early 22. I provided a printout that you guys all should have from the Transportation Trades Division that discusses the needs to prevent assaults on our transportation workers here in the state of Michigan and across the United States. We noticed that there wasn't enough police presence covering our Michigan operations with our trains. But believe it or not, there was only one uniformed officer stationed in Niles, Michigan that covered a large area spanning several states. So you can imagine the need if Amtrak employees were in need of assistance, how long that would take to get that assistance. Our organization reached out to the Washington, D.C. Amtrak Chief of Police in December of 2021 asking for more resources here in Michigan. For those that don't know, Amtrak police officers are, the amount of them are set by Congress. As of 2019, there was only 431. That may sound like a large number to some, may sound like a small number, but most of those officers are up in the Northeast corridor. So through our discussions, we were able to get commitments from Amtrak and the Chief of Police in D.C. to increase the police presence on our trains. Currently, MDOT now receives a monthly report of those train rides that are taken by APD. And they have stated that they're going to hire approximately 4 more. They're in the process of hiring 4 more, and they're going to be stationed in our Battle Creek crew change location. I will like to add that the freight railroads also have very little presence of police officers across the railroad. There is also talk of that Amtrak has a no-ride list. similar to the do not fly list, but it's not nearly as in depth. We've also noticed very many flaws within this process. There's been numerous times where an employee has been assaulted and the person, believe it or not, is allowed to board the next train or the next day after. So we need to figure out how to make sure that Amtrak keeps that no ride list up to date. I do have just a brief overview of just 4 assaults that we had in that time period. In October of 2021, there was a suspicious passenger removed from the train. He was carrying some luggage that eventually they found out that consisted of drugs and a handgun. He was allowed to board the next train. Of course, he said that it wasn't his luggage, but he was able to board the next train. On November of 21, there was a bomb threat by a passenger allowed to board the next day. February of 2022, crew was verbally threatened, removed by the Ann Arbor Police. And also in February of 22, we had a female conductor that was assaulted at the Battle Creek crew change station by a passenger that was late to the train. We also had, on the freight side, we had a rail yard employee that was shot in Detroit while performing his duties at the yard in North Yard near Mount Elliott in Detroit. I'll keep it brief. If you have any questions, I'd just like to ask for your support for House Bills 4917 and 4918.
Thank you. And gentlemen, do you have testimony to add?
Thank you, Chair Hope. My name is BJ Trumbull. I represent all the locomotive engineers in the state of Michigan, which is roughly about 1,000 unionized employees. To add on what Don said, from the freight side, this legislation helps protect our locomotive engineers. Unfortunately, the engineers are verbally abused, sometimes physically abused, and it usually comes down to when they're blocking crossings that we have no control over. And so in today's society, people get irate extremely quickly, and they're looking to lash it out on somebody. So this is just one more step to help protecting our train crews in the state of Michigan. So I thank you for your support.
Thank you, Chair, for having us here today. Again, my name is Nate Hatton. I'm the local chairman representing Amtrak conductors here in Michigan. And I believe these bills will give law enforcement the tools they need. As Don mentioned earlier, we had 2 members, or quite a few members, assaulted recently. The number of assaults that go on day to day is, they don't get recorded. I just like to mention, according to the Federal Transit Authority, these assaults are caused by a variety of factors. The rules that would allow these assaults to be collected and data to be recorded under current practices, an assault victim could have their nose broken, be hospitalized for 24 hours, suffer first-degree burns without triggering any reporting requirements. The main problem we're having, as Don said, these folks are getting back on the train. One of our members in Battle Creek, a young woman, she was punched in the face by a passenger who missed his train. This young woman now has to look out for this gentleman every day because he got off free. Nothing came of it. So this would be a helpful resource, to kind of prevent these things from happening, not having to look over our shoulders. We've had guns pulled on us, knives, we've been spit in the face. I can go on all day, but I appreciate you guys taking the time, hearing us out, and hopefully we can do something about this. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have, and Rep. Steckloff, you might want to rejoin us. We have questions from members here. Representative Breen?
Thank you, Chair Hope, and thank all of you for bringing this forward. What we're seeing against our transit workers is just unacceptable and appalling. I am a bit concerned because the penalties seem a bit heavy-handed compared to what we have with similar legislation and crimes here in Michigan. We recently passed some bills out of this committee for assaultive crimes against people in medical settings. But those are highly charged emotional situations. But just for context, a simple assault in Michigan, a penalty is 93 days in jail or a $500 fine. You're wanting to make it a 5-year felony. So I'm wondering if you're willing to consider something maybe more like a multiplier, because we have different levels of assault. whether it's a simple assault, aggravated assault, assault with a deadly weapon, those could be stiffer penalties as the crime enhances. Or if you're also wondering if you're willing to consider this as part of more of a de-escalation program, whether or not you're also willing to have people trained in de-escalation tactics, additional signage, similar to what the hospitals are doing. But overall, I am very supportive. I'm just wondering if we could maybe work with the penalties a little bit and also make it part of a larger anti-violence program.
Thank you, Representative Breen, for that question. Great question. So when we talk about the policing of Amtrak, the state of Michigan is paying for this, and we are not necessarily receiving the correct amount of officers that we pay for. Back in December, we finally got a report that says we get about 4 officers a month, and that's only 1 ride a month. A majority of these officers are, of course, stationed in Illinois. That's where the largest kind of hub is. Many states are looking at increasing the penalties for these types of aggregate assaults. But I know in the state of Michigan, you know, especially with this committee, you have worked very hard on sentencing guidelines. And there are a few states that do multipliers, especially Washington, D.C. does a 1.5 multiplier for these types of assaults cases. So this is definitely something that myself as the bill sponsor would love to work with you all on to get you into a comfortable place that we can all come together on. But of course, this is a very bad issue in Michigan right now, and it's definitely something that we need to work on.
Hello, Representative Breen. Thanks for the question. I'd just like to add that the trains now operate at 110 miles an hour, and the conductor, which Mr. Hatton is responsible for that train, and that is tons and tons of equipment or weight of equipment moving at a high rate of speed. We need to protect these employees to the utmost ability. And as Mr. Nate just stated, they do have de-escalation training within their current training program.
Thank you for that. I'm very happy to hear that there's an overall program I didn't know. That makes me feel a lot better. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Bazat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony. Very supportive of the bills. I had the same question that Rep. Breen had, so I'm kind of interested in, you know, the level of offense is, you know, fits the crime basically. But the banning, I mean, right now you said that there's the cases that you talked about, there was no charges. I mean, you can charge them with assault and battery, or those charges are available. So why weren't they charged? And then the other thing, to piggyback that, the banning of people that are assaulting why can't we ban them for a year or 2 years, or based on the crime up forever, basically?
Thank you for your question, Representative. As far as banning passengers, that's something that's being worked on, I think, on a federal level, and these bills are part of a larger, I guess, state of reform that we're undertaking as a union with our railroad operation here in Michigan. As far as being able to charge passengers with other levels of, you know, things that are already on the books, I guess. Local police look at the railroad as a foreign country. When we call police, we hit 911, they show up and they say, well, where's Amtrak police? We're not handling this. But yet I'm in the middle of downtown Battle Creek or Kalamazoo, Port Huron, many of the counties we travel through. A lot of local departments, they don't understand that they have this full right within their bounds to protect us, and it gets lost somewhere down the line. So I hope that answers your question a little bit.
That answers. I'm surprised by that, because if you're in my jurisdiction, we're going to charge, but we're going to take the report and charge. So I'm a little surprised that law enforcement would do that, but thanks for your testimony.
You should see my rants in Transportation Subcommittee, by the way, on that exact thing.
We do have a few more questions. Representative Cerniglu.
Thank you. I was just reading through the notes here, and I saw that a bus does not include a school bus. Just curious, is there another law that oversees a school bus, or is any particular reason that was not included?
I don't know, but I'll get back with you.
Fair enough. I appreciate that.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I love this kind of stuff. We look at the challenges, we look at the problems, and then we try to develop solutions. I do want to lift up a couple of things. So in Detroit, we have a queue line, which I think may fit that rail, but we also have a people mover that is above, and I want to be certain that those unique things that are unique to individual cities are covered in here. Can you give me that certainty?
Yes, those are.
Okay. All right. Very good. And then to the point about banning passengers, we have a severe mental illness crisis, not just in our state, but in the whole country. And so I'm hoping that we will take into consideration those who actually get help for some of their bad behavior, so that we're not banning people for life who are now rehabilitated or have gotten the help that they need to be able to conduct themselves. And so I just want us to be cognizant of that as we're looking at stuff like banning passengers.
And we're willing to work with that as well, because I believe that, and Mr. Hatton can speak to it because I believe he was a conductor on the train, but one of the individuals that was involved in one of these bomb threats was somebody that the police actually knew that they had a mental illness. So, and then they worked with that individual, so.
Our last question will come from Representative Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you guys all for being here. I appreciate what you do, and I know it's not always an easy job, especially when people are not making it easy on you. But I think looking at this bill, and I think we've discussed a little bit, I think we have some federally protected areas like the trains, and then we have some other areas that may deal with local municipalities or whatnot. But specifically dealing with the trains, since you guys are here, is there the ability to charge them federally versus state law currently? I know like airlines, we can charge them federally. So can we charge them federally with the train operations?
I don't think so. I know that the infrastructure bill was supposed to add a few details in there to where they could get to that point. But as of right now, there's that strong disconnect between like TSA being able to pull somebody off a plane compared to a train.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Actually, Representative, Homeland Security is pretty heavily involved with some of our operations. They make routine visits to some of our stations. But when we have some of these type of issues, their first thing that they say to our crews is call 911. It's not, they don't want to deal with it. So there's a disconnect there when it comes to these things.
I would imagine it's probably a faster response having the local police respond instead of Homeland Security, but.
Yeah, maybe against Homeland Security, but the Amtrak is very interesting in the state of Michigan. We are one of the only states that actually own the line, but it's a federal program. So local municipalities, we're trying to figure out who actually has control over the area. And that's obviously a further conversation that the federal government's going to have to get involved, but it's a huge issue. And we don't have enough Amtrak police officers available.
Thank you.
A lot of interest in this issue. I invite members who still have questions to follow up with the bill sponsor, and I'm sure these gentlemen are available as well. We do need to move on. We'll now hear House Bill 50. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a card. Todd Tennis from Capital Services would like to register his support for 4917 and 4918. He represents the Amalgamated Transit Union. Representative O'Neill.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My House Bill 5017 will allow the MDOC to offer their usual reentry services to support opportunities to a select group of individuals who are being resentenced due to the Supreme Court ruling to ban juvenile life without parole that has resulted in a few hundred additional prisoners who are currently serving life without parole sentences that may be in fact eligible for release because they were under the age of 19 when the crimes were committed. Madam Chair, many Many of those cases will proceed through the normal parole reentry process in the future, with those individuals having access to MDOC services in the community to assist with the transition. Unfortunately, a portion of those cases will immediately discharge from MDOC because their new sentence will be less than the time served, leaving them to fall outside of the MDOC's jurisdiction, thus not being able to access the reentry services. These are individuals, as you know, who need the support the most. The legislature solved this problem several years ago with cases where individuals were exonerated, removing them from the MDOC's jurisdiction, meaning they could not receive the vital services. We addressed that legislatively with PA 344 in 2016, and Madam Chair and members of this committee, it is needed again. This will not take any additional funding and is essential to help those who are most vulnerable with support. Members of this committee, I ask for your support of this bill, and we have experts here, my colleagues from MDOC, to answer any questions.
Thank you. Gentleman from MDOC, would you like to come up?
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. Kyle Kaminsky with the Michigan Department of Corrections. I'm actually going to have my associate, Matthew Bauk, provide a little bit of testimony, but then we'll both be available for any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Kyle. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Matthew Bauk. I'm a legislative analyst with the Michigan Department of Corrections, and today we're here in support of House Bill 5017. Representative O'Neill did a great job. I'm kind of going over the kind of bird's eye view of the bill and what it would do. Yes, it would allow the MDOC to provide those reentry services to juveniles who are resentenced and immediately, or juvenile lifers who are resentenced and immediately discharged from the department's jurisdiction. Currently, there's about 300 of these cases that are still subject to resentencing. And while we aren't certain as to how many of them will result in that immediate discharge to receive and be able to receive these services, we know that at least 20 of these individuals have already served at least 40 years in prison, making it likely that they could be subject to that immediate discharge. As Representative O'Neill stated, the MDOC already provides these reentry services to individuals who are paroled, depending on their need, their risk, their length of incarceration. And these reentry services include transitional housing, job and employment supports, social supports, assistance with accessing vital documents, as well as connections to behavioral and physical health support services in the communities. These supports, are critical to individuals, ensuring that they're successful when they're discharged from our jurisdiction, that they become self-sustaining, and most of these services are available to individuals up to 2 years after they're discharged. The MDOC already also has existing partnerships across the state with our administrative agencies who provide these services in every single county, so all 83 counties. We are simply, so that framework and staff already exist across the state. So we're merely looking for the authority to provide these services to these cases specifically, which this bill would allow. So that's all I have. Kyle and I are, and the representative are available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Representative Breen.
Thank you so much. I am fully supportive. I would argue that people, these are just simply for people who are being resentenced under Miller. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Miller as well as, so Miller is juvenile lifers, Montgomery is retroactive juvenile lifers, and then we have a separate case here in Michigan called Parks, which included 18-year-olds. So Miller Montgomery covers 17 and under, Parks includes 18. This would cover all three of those cases.
So I would personally argue that people who are incarcerated at such a young age probably need more help than people who were sent away when they were older. But do you have an approximate number as to how many individuals this might affect?
So it's difficult to project exactly because they will have to go through resentencing, and some may receive a life without the possibility of parole sentence even after resentencing, and then we have to apply the credits in each individual case. I think realistically we're probably talking about somewhere between 20 and 40 cases that this will impact. So when we think about the total number of people who leave prison every year, it's not a huge number, but for those 20 to 40, they will be some of the highest needs folks. So this will be hugely impactful for them.
Thank you so much.
Representative Filler.
Yeah,
there have been a number of individuals resentenced in the state of Michigan. Some have got term of years. Some have been released. I don't know. I don't want to say instantly, but pretty quickly. What is that process? And then some, of course, get their life in prison upheld. So, what's the percentage been of individuals released? And then, what does it look like to be released instantly from MDOC? Because we use the word instantly, but.
Yep. And I think there will actually be some people testifying after us that will be able to provide some additional insight to that, actual service providers who have worked with some of these cases. But to your main question, the majority of cases that have gone through resentencing have gotten a term of years sentence. Certainly not all of them, but the majority of them have. Many of them, both the minimum and the maximum reset based on resentencing, and they're immediately parole eligible. So they're going to go through a parole consideration process before release, which will take multiple months, essentially. And then if they were to release, they could get reentry services under the existing reentry setup. That last group is the immediate discharge, and it is pretty close to immediate. It oftentimes happens the same day that the court issues the updated judgment of sentence. If we are waiting on that judgment of sentence, let's say we get it very late in the day, it might be the next day. But for those folks, that might mean 30, 40 years of being incarcerated. They obviously know they're going through a court process, and it's a possibility that they'll be released. But from court to leaving our facilities is oftentimes just a matter of hours. And so it is a pretty significant change for those folks. And so that's why we want to certainly target this group. What we have seen in the absence of this legislation is a number of community organizations step up and try to help these folks, and we're really appreciative of that. But we feel as an agency that the state should actually be stepping in here and working with those community agencies to do the work, but also providing them with the funding to make sure that work happens in each of these cases.
So if this became law, you would quickly have to put in some framework because you have to prep in case that individual who goes through the Miller process is instantly released.
So the nice thing is that the framework is there. From a reentry perspective, the framework is there. We also are tracking these cases and have a sense of where they're at in the court process. So we have a little bit of lead time, not as much always as we might want, but we definitely have some lead time. We have good communication with oftentimes both parties, both the prosecutor and their attorneys, to kind of know if resentencing is expected so we can do things like vital documents in advance and get them running.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Amos.
We do have a couple of folks on Zoom. I'll call on Nate Johnson from the Fresh Coast Alliance, who's going to be testifying in support of the bill.
Hi, thank you so much for letting us come and share. I'm Nate Johnson with Fresh Coast Alliance. So we're an organization that specifically works with individuals who return home from prison here in Muskegon, Michigan. And over the last several years, since the juvenile lifer bill was put into play, we've been privileged to work with a number of these juvenile lifers. Now, in these particular cases, like was mentioned earlier, most of these folks are doing 40 plus years. And so one particular individual did 49 years, came to us and had no family, had no connection to any resources. And he discharged out of the MDOC, came here, and because he had discharged, there's no parole, so he had no access to any of the offender success funds. And so we were happy to take him when we realized he had no family and there was no one to go back to. So they reached out to us in Muskegon if he could come, and we said, yeah. So when he got here, some of the challenges that some of the folks face in these particular predicaments is they've been incarcerated for so long, and by the time they come home 40, 50 years, they're coming back to a world that no longer exists as they knew it. So there's a lot of social challenges that go into that. Some of these individuals are dealing with mental health issues. And so it makes, in the transition process, it makes it a little bit challenging. And then another thing, like because they're coming home in their mid to late 60s, trying to market them with some of our employers makes it a bit challenging as well, too, because a lot of it's manufacturing. So it's a bit more intensive labor, and physically they're just not able to keep up with that. And so a number of them have been with us for a couple of years now. And so we've hired them here as our, like custodians and things like that to help create some type of revenue. And then they volunteer and do some work on some of our properties, like mowing the grass and things like that, to help offset the what we're doing. And so we love it, and I think there's a lot of organizations across the state that are taking in some of these juvenile lifers, and some of the financial help would be a huge blessing, I think, to all of us. But thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. We'll now turn to Angie Sprank from Michigan Works West Central. She's also on Zoom.
Good morning, and thank you, everyone. A special thank you to Representative O'Neill for offering this bill. As stated, I'm with Michigan Works West Central, which is the administrative agency for Region 4 OS reentry services that Matthew spoke about. I've been in my position close to 12 years. Over the past several years, as Nate stated, we've worked closely with the department, SATO, and other agencies that deal specifically with the juvenile lifer population. We have received several back to our area, meaning Region 4, 13 county region, Kent and Muskegon. We would be asked to take individuals who have no support, and that's often the situation. Their support system, their family members have passed away, or that disconnect has happened over the years they served. We were happy to bring them back here. Many were on parole. All that returned to our area as juvenile lifers, the recidivism rate is 0%, and I believe that is due to the wraparound services that they're able to access. Nate spoke of an individual who did return to Region 4 who was not on parole. We've actually had 3 total that we have taken back here in West Michigan, and we've offered them wraparound services, but again, it was limited because they could not access OS funds. So as stated, typically when someone paroles, it's a smooth handoff. The Department of Corrections hands it off to OS. OS will hand it off to community and stay involved throughout that term of parole. If they can access OS services for a term without being on parole, we can still offer them that handoff. So they can get the basic life needs, clothing, shelter, food, but also they can start to form the positive relationships that are absolutely crucial for them to succeed. So under OS, like it was stated, we can offer transitional housing, but even more basic, we can get them hygiene kits, clothing vouchers. We can get their vital documents. They can access trauma counseling, which many of them do access and do need. They can work with our medical navigator. They get to access our resource navigators. Every county has a resource navigator. And with the juvenile lifer population, it is a unique population because, as someone stated earlier, they went to prison as a juvenile, they were raised in the system, and they served significant time. So often our navigators or the individuals at Fresh Coast are spending hours with them just to even apply for medical benefits, to pick out a doctor, a primary care doctor, to teach them how to use public transportation. This might literally mean riding the bus system with them, opening up a bank account, learning how to use. So the things that we basically take for granted on a daily basis, they are returning to a society where they never accessed or used those. And OS would allow them to access those different mentoring services where they can build those much needed positive relationships. And then we'll continue to link them to the community and leverage the resources that we have. As Kyle stated, this is not a large population that would need these services, but it is crucial that they do receive them. So I thank you for considering it.
Thank you. Questions, members? No? Thank you very much. We have a couple of cards here from Noah Smith in his capacity representing the Criminal Defense Attorneys of Michigan and Safe and Just Michigan. Support the bill. Do not wish to speak. We'll now take testimony on House Bill 5046. Representative Shannon. And if you want to call up your guests at the same time, that's fine too.
Well, thank you so much, Chair and committee members. here today to talk about court reporters. So since 1986, Michigan statute has set the court transcript rates at $1.75 for the original and 30 cents for the copy. Michigan is currently among the lowest rates in the nation and roughly half of the national average. House Bill 5046 would raise this for the first time in over 36 years to $3.75 per page and 90 cents per page for each copy. My bill would also set a minimum charge for a transcript at $50 and would require the state treasurer to adjust these rates every 5 years based on the Consumer Price Index. This bill came to me from a constituent after she contacted my office, pointed out how the courts within my own district are struggling to keep pace with the transcript requests. This is due to high demand for transcripts and a shortage of certified court reporters that are willing to take a significantly low rate of compensation. So with that, I will take any questions, but I also have two guest court reporters here that could probably have much more expertise than I do.
Sure. Ladies, please introduce yourselves and go ahead and get started when you're ready.
My name is Amy Shankleton Novus. I am a court reporter. I was certified in 1979, and I started my business as a freelance court reporter in 1988. This is my daughter, Kristen Shankleton. She works for me, and she's been a court reporter for 20 years, or
23. Oh, my whole life, basically.
Yeah, well, since she was a little kid, too. Had a kid at each elbow while I typed transcripts. Just some things we would like to point out that not all, I had a list that I passed out, but the representative covered most of them much more eloquently than I think I could. What we would like to point out, though, is that we realize that everybody's budget and line items are very strict sometimes. A lot of the transcripts that we type probably 5,000 or 6,000 pages a month. We work for several different counties throughout the state of Michigan, from Crystal Falls to Oakland County to Hillsdale, Hart, all over the state, Oakland County. We provide a very valuable service, and we are finding, I have 8 people that type for us. Nobody wants to do this anymore because it's barely minimum wage by the time we figure out the typing, the proofreading, the downloading, the recordings, hoping your computer is not going to have a glitch. And so we are finding a severe shortage. I've had to turn down some counties' transcription for their courts because of our overload. It takes me a year to train somebody to be adequate to even type and competent to type transcripts to a level that is sufficient. And I would note that we have typed some of these Miller hearings that were just discussed. I don't know the outcome. We don't always hear that, but that was interesting. But many of the court transcripts are not paid for by the funding unit. They are civil cases. We have a lot of civil litigation, as you know, throughout the state of Michigan. Those transcripts are paid for by the parties. And we are also experiencing, after COVID, we type a lot of transcripts from Zoom hearings, which are incredibly difficult, very time-consuming. And sometimes we only get 4 or 5 pages an hour. Ordinarily, we can get 12 pages an hour. And out of this page rate that we are asking for, me as a private freelance owner, I will pay a typist. I promised them for 20 years that if we got the page rate increase, they get a raise too. But I also pay transcribers out of there. I proofread their work. I also pay out of that my employee, workers' comp, medical insurance, dental insurance, optical insurance, all the other things that small business employees. I am a small business, and I love what I do. All of us court reporters love what we do. And I'm not going to read this to you. I did pass this out, but one thing I would like to point out is that, for example, we are working on a 2-week murder trial, 2 defendants. 2 juries, 2 separate juries, and we've been able to sort it out because of our expertise. But for a court reporter and recorder who is sitting in the courtroom daily, you might get a break, you might get a lunch. I actually, when I worked at Circuit Court in Washtenaw County, the judge gave us a 10-minute break. That was my lunch. An attorney actually followed me into the ladies' room with a transcript request. I said, really? Our services are incredibly in demand, and I will, lost my train of thought, but I will let Kristen pick up.
Just to piggyback on the not having enough certified, qualified people, this shortage of certified transcribers frequently causes delayed transcript production, resulting in the inability to prepare for and proceed with upcoming court hearings, trials, and appeals. The causal effect is a decrease in judicial economy and justice not being served. These are the lives and livelihoods of the people of the state of Michigan, and they're being detrimentally impacted by not being able to access their transcripts timely. Because we can't hire people for 1987 rates.
The Court of Appeals is also very concerned because transcripts are continually being delayed, especially with COVID. Now we're catching up with all the cases. Some of our court reporters actually were running court from their homes while they were homeschooling. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions.
We do have a question from Representative Breen.
Thank you. In my prior life, I met many, many court reporters, and I've been hearing ever since I started practicing law that you guys are getting hosed. So I'm glad that this is hopefully going to get rectified. Are you aware of any courts that provide a sliding scale for people who just might not have the money in order to obtain a transcript, especially people who might be representing themselves? That was first question. And the second one is, do you charge the same for, say, digital copies as you do paper, or is there any type of a difference in that?
What we can charge per, excuse me, what we can charge per page is set by statute. I'm on the Board of Review for the State Court, Supreme Courts, and we have a lot of issues about can we charge more because I don't work for the court. Now, are you talking about a sliding scale for indigent defendants?
Correct.
And criminal or civil? Because generally, if they don't have the funds to pay for their transcripts, they can apply to the court, and the court will pay for their transcripts.
Okay.
I understand that there are different avenues that the courts can get from funds to help with that. I have on occasion done pro bono transcripts because it's the thing to do. I was a single mom a long time. I've been through the system, and people's lives and livelihoods depend on my expertise. Is it $150,000 or $115,000? That makes a big difference in a transcript. And all the laws that we passed in this building, we are the ones who make their cases come to fruition by the transcripts that we type, the appeals that they take, the orders and judgments that are entered. So that was a long way answer to your question, I think. I'm sorry.
Digital copies, is it the same?
It's the same amount of work now. A stenographer takes it down a shorthand and prints it, but we manually type it from the recording. We download the recording from the courts 99% of the time. It's the same amount of work. We manually type it into a Word document, save it as a PDF, and many courts will now let us file digitally.
Thank you.
Yes, it's the same for
It's the
PDF
same, yes.
or printed.
We do have several more questions. Representative Carter.
Yeah, real quick. Thank you for this, Representative Shannon. In my former life, I've been in every courtroom in Wayne County, probate, circuit, criminal, juvenile, and the unsung heroes have always been two people, the clerks and you guys.
Thank you.
And I've known quite a few. And people really don't gravitate to this because of the pay. So hopefully we can get that, because I know almost every court is looking for clerks and recorders. So.
Thank you, Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. First, I want to echo what Representative Carter said, that I think people don't appreciate how much of the court system grinds to a halt without people who are providing these essential services. Representative Breen asked the first part of my question, so I just want to put it to the bill sponsor, if you're willing to work in something here that allows for indigent people to get access to transcripts in a kind of a codified, easy way, because I think while there is an application process in, I don't know, in all courts, in some courts at least, it isn't fast. And so there is sort of like a timeliness issue. And I mean, obviously the rates need to go up. I fully agree with that in general, but I just want to make sure that, you know, people in hard situations that need access to transcripts for appeals and whatnot have a quick and easy way to do it that doesn't, you know, require them to have money they don't have.
And I agree with you. We don't want to be burdening people with the higher rates. But are you leaving a note for me, or did you have something to add to that? But yes, Rev. Andrews, you wanted to have that conversation. Thank you.
I do know that there is a group that's called Michigan Indigent Defense Council, and I have worked with them for some of the indigent defendants who needed their transcripts, and then they have funds that have been paid to us.
Representative Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious at this rate, and of course this is well overdue, so we're sorry that we're just getting to it, but hopefully we can get it done this term. Is there an average time length? I'm looking at the document you guys gave us and that column that talks about expedited, and so what is an average amount of time just based on this $3.75 rate with somebody? And I know it depends, because I'm looking here, this is what I'm getting at, Maine in particular. When you look at Maine and it talks about 1 day turnaround, of course it's a higher rate, and then it goes down to 21-day turnaround from $3.70 all the way up to $5.75. And I'm just wondering, have you all looked at doing something like that in terms of expedited rates, or is it just this flat rate no matter what?
Well, we are pretty much regulated by the State Court Administrative Office and the Board of Review, and they have determined that if someone wants to get an expedited transcript, yes, we can charge expedited rates. Generally, if somebody just comes in and wants a transcript, I tell them generally we try to get them out in 28 days. 28 days. Depending on the difficulty. Sometimes we have doctors and it takes a little longer to type. But generally, at my firm, I try to get them out in 28 days. But for appeal purposes, the timelines are statute and court rule. So pleas and sentences we have to have within 28 days. Jury trials, generally from circuit court to the Court of Appeals, is 91 days. We are in a position right now where we have this one that's going to be 1,500 pages, and I'm going to have to ask for an extension because you can only type a murder trial for so long in the day before you just are exhausted, and it's taken us a while to get this, and so we do ask for extensions from the Court of Appeals, and they do usually, especially after COVID, have been accommodating of our requests. Right now, I had a call just last week from an attorney who said, what can I do? The court reporting service that the court up here uses, they're so backed up that their timeline they're giving me for the transcript is past my appeal period. What do? I said, I would love to help you, but I am so overwhelmed. Ours is a work that when we go home at the end of the day, we are never done. I always have a stack of transcript requests about this big. And I would also point out that we do depositions, we do a lot of other hearings and things, so that kind of supplements and our other things. Generally, if you look at this, generally for an appeal, we would file an original and 2 copies. So if you figure that is $3.75 plus, that makes it about $5.55-ish for original and 2 copies. When I do depositions, that's about the same rate. And we really need to be, we have court reporters and recorders who leave the court system to go into private practice because they can make twice as much. And it's my recording, it's not a Zoom recording or something. And so, does that answer your? It does. Thank you for. And
Thank you. Thank you. And I do want to read in a couple of cards. Thank you very much, folks. We won't be voting today, obviously, but we'll get back to you on that. Scale is neutral on House Bill 5046. Samantha Gibson does not wish to speak. She represents the Michigan Association of Counties, which opposes 5046. Thank you. We'll now take a vote on House Bill 4850. We took testimony on this bill on October 3rd. I'll take a motion on the H1 substitute for 4850. Representative Filler moves. Madam Clerk, would you please take and announce the vote?
To adopt the substitute H1 to House Bill 4850, Chair Hope.
Yes.
Representatives Andrews.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Breen. Aye. Young.
Yes.
Harbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu. Yes. Filler.
Yes.
Mueller.
Yes.
Bazat.
Yes.
Harris. Begol.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. The substitute is adopted.
Representative Cerniglu moves to report HB 4850 with recommendation as substitute H1. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope.
Yes.
Representatives Andrews.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Breen. Aye. Young.
Yes.
Harbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Filler.
Yes.
Mueller.
Yes.
Bazat.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Begol.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 13 yeas, 0 nays, and 0 pass. House Bill 4850 is reported with recommendation as substitute H1.
Thank you. We'll now take a vote on House Bills 4948 and 4960. We had testimony last week on these bills. We do have a substitute for HB 4948, and I would like to invite, if she's here, Representative Grant to speak to her sub.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Hope and the committee for allowing us to speak to these bills last week. Just wanted to make some quick clarifications on the H1 sub that we have here. After some feedback and also due to some questions that the committee had, we wanted to provide some clarifying language in the bill. So working with the Michigan Realtors, we clarified language talking about the fact that this bill only prohibits landlords to look at information that was expunged. So we wanted to provide a sentence that made that very, very clear. They still have the ability to look into criminal history overall. And then also there's a small tweak from the AG's office that cleans up language around subsection 3. It makes it more clear that the tenant can only recover fees if that specific subsection is found to be violated by the landlord, not if action is taken in general, but that specific subsection 3.
Thank you, and I understand Representative Filler has something he would like to say.
Yes, and thanks, Rep. And I guess I had some outreach from a couple groups this morning on 4948 and 4960, which I believe we are voting on both today. And so we look forward to ongoing conversations. I guess there is worry about 4960, the language being confusing and stopping individuals asking about arrests or detentions or dispositions, which may be ongoing. And so we just kind of look forward to working with you and with Representative Snyder, especially on 4960 going forward. So thank you. And I just received the sub, before committee, so we didn't really get a time to review, but we will review, and if we have questions, we'll get back to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative. We do have a few cards to read in. Noah Smith, representing Safe and Just Michigan, does not wish to speak, supports both 4948 and 4960. Noah Smith, representing the Criminal Defense Attorneys of Michigan, does not wish to speak, supports 4948, 4960. Forrest Wall, from the Apartment Association of Michigan. Supports 4948, does not wish to speak. Jim Shafsma from the Michigan Poverty Law Program supports 4948. I'll take a motion from Representative Devendorf to adopt the H1 substitute for HB 4948. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope.
Yes.
Representatives Andrews.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Breen.
Aye.
Young.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Filler.
Pass.
Mueller.
Pass.
Bazat.
Pass.
Harris.
Pass.
Bagol.
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays, and 5 pass. The substitute H1 to House Bill 4948 is adopted.
Thank you. Representative Arbit moves to report HB 4948 with recommendation as substitute H1. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope.
Yes.
Representatives Andrews.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Breen.
Aye.
Young.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Filler.
Pass.
Mueller.
Pass.
Bazat.
Pass.
Harris.
Pass.
Bagol.
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays, and 5 pass. House Bill 4948 is reported with recommendation as substitute H1.
Thank you. Representative Young moves to report HB 4960 with recommendation. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Chair Hope.
Yes.
Representatives Andrews.
Yes.
Carter.
Yes.
Breen.
Aye.
Young.
Yes.
Arbit.
Yes.
Devendorf.
Yes.
Cerniglu.
Yes.
Filler.
Pass.
Mueller.
Pass.
Bazat.
Pass.
Harris.
Pass.
Bagol.
Pass.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays, and 5 pass. House Bill 4960 is reported with recommendation.
Thank you. We have no absent members, and there being no further business before the committee, we are adjourned.